Hey everybody, it's the Menschwarmers, your bi-weekly look at the world of Jews and sports. I am joined today by a special guest, Alex Rose. How you doing, Alex?
I'm good, thanks. It's good to be back. Very good to be back.
Yeah, for some of our newer listeners or other people who aren't as familiar with the wide range of CJN podcasts, Alex was formerly our producer and was also the host of the Canadian Jewish Schmooze, the CJN's former flagship podcast, which has now been dethroned by Bonjour Chai. But Alex no longer with the CJN, but still happy to guest with us today. Gabe's away. Alex, what's been going on with you in the last year or so since the CJN folded?
Yeah, since it folded for maybe the third time in its history, I don't know, but certainly the second time in 6 years or whatever. I was lucky. I had something lined up. I had been about to leave anyways, to go back to school, actually, to study cognitive science and psychology at the University of Toronto. And
very cool.
I actually ended up, I don't know if this is like bad form to say, but I made more money from severance pay than I would have working out the last month there. So, I mean, I love the CJN. I'm very sad that about what happened and everyone I worked with, because it was an amazing work environment for me. But from a purely like selfish perspective, it wasn't the worst thing in the world.
Well, we're obviously glad that it's back in its new form.
Absolutely.
Has school been good? Has it been weird doing school during COVID times? I take it it's been all online.
Yeah. It's rough. Some things, like the flexibility of the schedule with all the recorded lectures and stuff, is a big positive. But then recorded lectures are awful.
Right.
But I'm very happy. I feel like it was the right choice for me, this program, and I'm really interested in what I'm doing. That's great. Overall, it's been good. Yeah. And if the CJN had gone under and I hadn't been going back to school, who knows what I would have spent the last year doing. So,
because it's always good to have a grad school acceptance in one's back pocket in case their job doesn't work out.
Yeah, you could say that.
Well, there's some pressing news that we want to talk about. Julian Edelman retired yesterday, and we're going to focus on that for most of the episode. But before we get to that, we just wanted to take a quick moment to check in on a few stories from the world of basketball and hockey. Both are, about halfway through their year, maybe a little bit closer towards the end. Alex, you mentioned you wanted to talk about Zach Hyman, Toronto Maple Leafs player, and who's going to be an upcoming free agent. So what's going on with Zach?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting time to kind of look at his role with the team and the player he's grown into, especially because, for those of you who don't know, the NHL trade deadline just passed. And Hyman is known as like a gritty, hard-nosed player. He forechecks really well, but he's been putting up points and goals the last few years that people, even when they thought he had a place in the NHL, they didn't maybe think it was as a top six forward. And the Leafs traded for a few more defensive forwards over the last few days, which is kind of noteworthy to me because it means that they might trust Hyman to play up in the lineup with the Stars and not lower in the lineup as a defensive forward. He's been bouncing around throughout the season. And this is a guy who did 4 years at college and people didn't even know he'd make the NHL. I remember when he went to Florida, it was a big deal. Like I went to the same middle school and high school with him back at the day. I'm a few years younger. I don't know, but just like, it's cool. The guy I played ball hockey with in our little basement gym is now drafted in the NHL, and then he's traded to the Leafs, and then he's a star for the Leafs. He's averaging, if this was an 82 game season, he'd be on pace for 30 goals.
Yeah, so he already has 31 points through 40 games. He's he's going to surpass his career highs in goals and assists in all likelihood, in a shortened season even. And he's getting up to almost 20 minutes a game of ice time. Really, really blossoming, I think, in a way that people were maybe a little surprised by. He's 28 years old now. Hockey players tend to peak around 28 to 30, but still impressive to see how he's coming along for his hometown team.
Yeah, and I saw in the comments of some articles recently, people were talking about if he'd take a hometown discount or not to stay with Toronto in the offseason. And I don't know, I thought it was interesting because he doesn't maybe have a background that other athletes always have. I'm trying to say that delicately, but
you mean he comes from a well-to-do Jewish family, I think is what you're trying to say.
Yes. And maybe like if he can get a few million over the life of a contract somewhere else, it might not be life-changing for him and his family because he's not supporting his extended family like some athletes are, or at least supporting their lifestyle. And I don't know, do you think that means he's more likely to take a hometown discount, or should we not even speculate about that?
It's a very interesting question. I don't know what drives certain people to take a hometown discount or not. Certainly we've seen in basketball and football, even baseball and hockey, that there has been more of like a player empowerment era, and like guys being able to write their own ticket and decide where they want to play, whether it's their hometown or just, it's where they want to be because they have a secondary interest in movies like LeBron James or something else that, they want to do. It's hard to say. I mean, like, I can't speak from the position of a pro athlete, but like if I had my druthers, like if I was a free agent, I would sign with the Toronto team regardless. I don't care. Like the amount of money you're talking about, if you're talking about the difference between like, and I don't know exactly what Hyman would get because I'm not up enough on NHL free agency, but like if the difference is between like 30 million over 4 years and like 25 million over 4 years, like $5 million is an absurd amount of money. Like it's a lot of money, but the difference between 25 and 30 is much smaller than the difference between 1 and 6, for example. And so the idea of like being able to play at home would be very enticing to me. I mean, no matter who I was, but players are different, and part of it I think for them is just judging team culture, the guys they're going to play with, the opportunity to compete for a championship in whatever sport they're playing. And I think all those things factor in, and also for a lot of athletes, they're taking advice from their families and their, wives and agents and things like that. And, people are sort of not making the decision for them, but certainly in their ears about that sort of thing. So, now in terms of like where he's coming from, does that make a difference? I would say probably not. I mean, it's still a huge amount of money either way. And to be, to do something for less than its value on the free market is never advisable unless there's some intrinsic benefit to taking less money. So I guess we'll see. It is an interesting story though.
And I do think Hyman's also just such an interesting player. I mean, I don't know, when you think of like a modern Jewish athlete, again, there are only so many of them, but many more than people are aware of, which is the point of this podcast. I mean, I don't know if this makes sense, but he kind of like just his kind of style reminds me of like the more like back in the day, like tenement era Jewish athletes, just in terms of like what you think about when you think about it. It's not about the flash, but it's about like the grinder, the hard work, and the way he's able to like slowly elevate his game, but to go from like a bottom of the lineup forward who's just maybe killing penalties a bit or getting in the corners to now, I mean, doing the same stuff, but with the best players in the game and being able to put, goals on the board and he gets the puck to Austin Matthews or Mitch Marner or Tavares or Willie, whoever he's playing with, William Nylander. And he puts the puck in the back of the net too. And I don't know, there's just something about the way he's kind of worked his way up that it just reminds me of like the old kind of athletes we've talked about. I don't know if that's fair or not.
No, I think that's fair. Although he is deceptively tall. I thought he was a smaller guy, but he's listed at 6'1". And, I think one of the ways that Jews might have an advantage in hockey as opposed to other sports is that height isn't as necessary. Like there's a lot of hockey players who are in the 5'8" to 6 feet range, as opposed to basketball. Obviously, there's been very few players altogether that are under 6 feet. Baseball, there's a few dozen in the league at any time, but hockey has a fair amount. And the Hughes brothers, for example, I think are both like 5'10", like not imposing guys. But Hyman's actually 6'1", so I think he has. It's interesting to make that connection, I guess, between the sort of tenement era.
I guess it's like the blue collar. They talk about like lunch pail workers or blue collar like workers and sports teams or athletes, but he doesn't maybe come from a blue collar background, which is maybe like what the contrast feels like. So yeah, I mean, I think a lot like Jews still pride ourselves on being hard workers, but now it's like I'm a doctor, a lawyer, or a banker, and not like working in a factory for 12 hours a day to feed my 7 children on the
Lower East Side.
I don't remember which side is which in Manhattan. Yeah, there it is.
Going to the other end of the height spectrum, there's someone we want to talk about halfway through the NBA season, or a little bit more than halfway. We want to talk about NBA rookie Deni Avdija, the first, the highest pick from Israel, the 9th overall pick by the Washington Wizards. He is, to be honest, struggling a little bit. He's putting together a fair amount of playing time, 23 minutes a game, but only averaging about 6 points, 5 rebounds a game. Not exactly where we'd want him to see him to be, but he is getting praise from his coaches. And there's an expectation that there's going to be a learning curve moving to the American game. He's someone who'd played professionally in Israel, but obviously it's a different game in America, and he didn't grow up in the AAU or the American college system. So, he's put some good games together. He had a 16-point game the other day. He had a 12-point game, 10-rebound game against the Raptors a week and a half ago. So, we'll continue to monitor him and see where he's at. It's always tricky with these guys because I feel like there's such a expectation that people are going to succeed immediately, that when someone doesn't, it's sort of like, well, what happened here? Why did we, are you a bust? Like you get that title put on you very quickly. And I don't think there's anything to say that Denny is a bust. It's way too early to say, but it is tricky when it's like, what if there's an NBA player who needs 4 years of development in the NBA? What if, you need 5 years in the NBA? Guys aren't really getting that rope. And it's, you really have to perform at a very early time.
Yeah, I think it's also just such a pretty weird situation, especially for a rookie to come in. I think the front court of the Wizards have been hurt for much of the season. You got Beal and Westbrook, who are two really ball-dominant players. I mean, it's kind of like the worst of all worlds, because sometimes if you're a rookie on a bad team, like Anthony Edwards, you at least get the ball a lot and get to put up your stats, or else you're a rookie on a good team and, you get to win and be part of like a winning culture and play your role on a good team and know what that's like. But he's a rookie on a bad team with two ball dominant stars. So it is a really tough kind of environment to judge. Like, you're not going to be able to see his kind of higher level, like playmaking, ball handling, scoring skill, because he doesn't get those opportunities. And then he is shooting well from three, we should say. He's shooting 32% from three, or 33% from three, which is, pretty good. Like for a 3-point shooter, anything over, in the 300s is pretty solid usually. He is getting his looks. I think it'll be a matter of time with Denny. He's only 20 years old. We really need to see a little bit more of him. I hope we do next year. I think the Wizards are in like probably the first of like the first year in like a 5-year rebuild after getting rid of John Wall. They have Westbrook's contract, which I can't remember if it expires after next year or 2 years after. Bradley Beal, who still on the
is
team.
A great player, but still on the team somehow. I'm not sure exactly what his contract is, but I don't think he's someone that we expect to be on the team forever. And Denny will have his moments. He'll have a shot to really become the first Israeli star in the NBA.
I haven't been following him that closely, but what I've been reading and hearing a little bit, it seems like there are enough flashes that there's still reason to have hope, right? And that's, I guess, all you can take away from a season like this.
And I think it's been a good experiment in marketing from an NBA team. The Washington Wizards have an Israeli Twitter page now, which is, I think, the first for an NBA team, or really any sports team, which is pretty cool to see. Just like, mostly a feed on Denny. I'm not sure if it was like the social media guy already spoke Hebrew or they had to hire a consultant or something, but it is a very interesting new thing in terms of marketing to an audience. I think it'd be interesting to hear the perspective of someone in Israel about what they're hearing about Denny, because, we don't get the full perspective that they have, but I can only assume that they're cheering him on or following his career in the NBA to a certain amount.
Yeah, and Zach Lowe, for those of you who are familiar with the ESPN writer, I know he's behind a paywall now if you're in the States, but he does a weekly column, 10 Things I Like and Don't Like, and he talked about Denny last week. So
that's great. Was he a like or a don't like?
Yeah, this is the title. It's Denny Avdia. Did I say that right?
Avdia, yeah.
Avdia. Okay, getting over the jitters. So he was saying like he really bled into the background at the beginning, and there was a lot going on. And now it seems like since he's been back in the starting lineup, he's playing like he belongs there, and he feels like he belongs there, and everything else is a work in progress. But there's enough that he sees like to build on that it seems like a jack of all trades, complementary starter on a good team is I think what Zach Lowe says is a reasonable outlook.
That's not bad. I really do hope that he develops in the start. It really would be something to have a Jewish NBA All-Star.
Yeah.
I don't know when the last one was. If we're not counting Amare, who hadn't converted at that time.
Yeah.
But it's probably like Dolph Shays or something like that. So I don't even know if they had All-Star games back then. But anyways, we wish Denny luck. So why don't we take a quick break, and then we'll come back with a discussion about what Julian Edelman's career has meant.
Sounds good.
We're taping this on Tuesday, April 13th. Yesterday, on April 12th, Julian Edelman was released by the New England Patriots, and shortly afterwards announced that he would be retiring. He had a career that included parts of 11 seasons. Just to go through the numbers a little bit, he was drafted in the 7th round by the New England Patriots in the 2009 NFL draft after a career at Kent State, not a big football school. Grew up in California, undersized guy, I think listed under 200 pounds his entire career. Didn't really do much his first couple years in the NFL, started a few games here and there. But really blossomed in 2013 when he had his first 1,000-yard receiving year. He would have 2 more after that. He was a huge part of New England's 3 Super Bowl victories in the 2010s. He also made it to 2 other Super Bowls, I guess, with the Patriots that they lost. He retires with this is pretty amazing. He retires with the 2nd most playoff receiving yards of any player in NFL history, behind Jerry Rice, who's I think undisputedly the greatest, or certainly thought of as the greatest receiver of all time.
That's incredible.
So we can talk about Julian Edelman, the player, and I think there's plenty to talk about there. There's this thing that happens, Alex, after someone retires, where it's like, oh, they're not a Hall of Famer. They're not a Hall of Famer. And it's like, you know what? He's probably not a Hall of Famer. I mean, aside from what he did in the playoffs, his numbers are not Hall of Fame numbers. He's pretty good. He was a Hall of Very Good kind of guy. The playoff resume is probably more significant than anything he did during the regular season, and something that he should be very proud of. He was the first Jewish Super Bowl MVP in 2018, which, again, something we probably may or may not see for a long time. But I think from our perspective, there's something we want to talk about as well, which is what he's done off the field. He is someone who is of I don't know exactly. We're not eugenicists here. I don't know exactly what the portion is, but I believe he's half Jewish. I think his dad is Jewish, and he isn't someone who grew up with a ton of Judaism. But he is someone who has wholeheartedly embraced Judaism towards the end of his career, and has become a real public face about Judaism. And I think that's been, something that's really worth celebrating.
It's, I know you guys have touched on this idea a lot, but kind of the mantle of being a Jewish athlete, when there are so few that are really public figures in the big 4 sports, at least in North America, and how it can kind of be thrust on people, and some really live up to it, even if they weren't necessarily raised with such a strong Jewish identity. And he's probably like the poster child of that, right?
Yeah. He went on a sort of birthright style kind of trip that I think was paid for by Robert Kraft, the Patriots owner, who we've made fun of.
Now he's like, he could probably just go on birthright itself. They've upped the age limit so high.
Yeah, that's right. So you don't need to have a billionaire NFL team owner to send you there. But so he went on a birthright style trip in 2019. But in the after 2013, he sort of was someone who embraced it. In 2018, after the Etz Chaim shootings at the Pittsburgh synagogue that resulted in 11 people being killed, he wore cleats with Hebrew on them to honor the victims. He's tweeting out things about that. Just last month, when Myers Leonard, the NBA basketball player, said something anti-Semitic on a Twitch stream, Julian Edelman was the first big athlete, big 4 athlete, prominent athlete, to come out and say something about it and talk about reconciliation and teaching him about what had gone wrong, and cap all of this off with yesterday, when he does this 4-minute long sort of tribute video about his career, and he is rocking a big Magen David over the shirt in his announcement the entire time. And I don't know if I can think of an athlete. Definitely not an athlete. I can't think of an athlete in a mainstream American sport who has publicly shown their Judaism in such a way in the last many decades. We're not talking about Al Rosen and Sandy Koufax, really different eras. And, I'm not talking about Sean Green posing with a bagel in Sports Illustrated. I'm talking about someone who has really embraced it, who has shown it, and been incredibly public about it. And, you can say, I think there's, you can take a skeptical position on this. You can look at it as, oh, he's just doing this to appeal to a certain type of audience, to appeal to Jewish fans, which, even if that's the case, Dayenu, that's fine. If somebody just wants to really appeal to their Jewish fans, but I think he's someone who he's not. He has really embraced it. And really, can you think of any other Jewish athlete who has embraced it in this way, aside from people playing for Team Israel? Like, no one of this stature has done this.
I mean, we were just talking about Zach Hyman. I think he's done stuff with the local UJA, but
fair enough.
But he's not an NFL. He's not a Super Bowl MVP.
Exactly. He's not a Super Bowl MVP. I think, Braun has, been okay with it, but he hasn't embraced it in this way. Alex Bregman, again, is happy to say that he's Jewish, but Julian Edelman is like,
he's going out of his way. It's like he's making himself the spokesperson in a positive way. He's not someone like where it's not his place, but like when it's good news, bad news, no news, like right. He's there front and center with the Star of David on his chest. I mean, that's what we all want to see, right?
I think so. And I think it is part of I don't want to put too much on Julian Edelman's shoulders in terms of a representation of Judaism to the world, but there is a projection of Judaism that is common, that is of a intellectual, of a neurotic, of a certain type of person that we have plenty of examples of, and I am proud to have them. I look fondly on someone like Philip Roth. Or other Jewish writers and intellectuals who I've cherished throughout my life. But it's also important to have this sort of physical, in your face, proud Judaism that honestly, I don't think we really see in North American circles. Like, I don't see a lot of outside of athletes. I don't think we see a lot of singers or musicians or actors or anything like that who are as in your face about their Judaism as Edelman is in a positive way.
It's just interesting because obviously we know a lot of Jews, and we know Jews are just people like anyone else. And yet I feel like even for us, there's still maybe like the stereotype of who like a famous Jew is, if you know what I mean by that, where I think it might be, I don't know, like, I don't think Julian Edelman represents Jews as much as he represents himself, which is a sign that like Jews are not just one thing. Like, no people is one thing.
Let me put it this way. It's nice to see someone be unapologetically Jewish.
Yes.
No strings attached. And I guess I would say that Drake is probably another good example, and someone who celebrates his Judaism in a very overt way.
Yeah.
Again, not in the same way as Julian Edelman in terms of the response to specific issues of anti-Semitism. But again, it's nice to have these sort of aggressive, unapologetic examples of Judaism, and I think he's really been that for many years.
Well, yeah, it's just like he's Jewish the way like a New York Italian is Catholic or something. I don't know if like you know what I mean by that.
Right. I mean, there's plenty of counter examples. Like,
there's like the bling and
there's lots of people who talk very publicly about being Christian or their relationship to Jesus or whatever. I mean, especially in mainstream American culture. So I guess it's nice at the very least to have a counter example, from the Jews to sort of show what that means.
Yeah. That's not in like literature, the movies, because
those
all do tend to be like you were saying earlier with Philip Roth. It's all the same kind of like representation. So yeah, I agree. It's been great.
Anyways, I think we can leave it there in terms of our tribute. We're sad to see him go, but I'm sure this isn't the end of Julian Edelman. I think whether it's media or coaching or who knows what, he's someone who we're going to have around for a number of years. He's a charismatic guy, and I think he knows that he can parlay his success on the field to a significant career off the field as well. And I look forward to seeing what that entails. Hopefully it entails something related to being a Jew as well.
We've been lucky to have him. I just remember when he first started playing for the Patriots, he took Wes Welker's spot, and I hated him. And it's crazy, like, to see how far he's come and how, a lot of people have probably come in their feelings towards him.
And if he unretires after a year and goes to join Tom Brady and Gronkowski with the Bucs, we'll do this whole thing again in a few years.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Anyways, let's leave it there for now. You can follow us as always at the Benchwarmers. Please like and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast. Leave us a review on iTunes or wherever else you can leave us a review. We are brought to you as always by the Canadian Jewish News. You can catch up with what's going on with the Canadian Jewish News at thecjn.com and the CJN Lounge on Facebook. It is also the CJN.ca, I am told by my producer, Michael. We'll be back in a few weeks with all the stories you can take about Jews and sports. See you later.
Bye.